Today we're talking about intimacy in worship, and joining me is Brian Doerksen. I've got a few questions for you, Brian. You have some stories to tell. You've got a lot of experience leading worship and raising up leaders, and we're really excited to learn from you today. The first question I have for you is a story and then the heart behind this story. So the story of Come Now Is the Time, a song that we all know, maybe 20 years old?
Can you believe it?
Yeah. So 20 years ago,
Yeah.
you had an experience with the Lord, and out came a song. So tell us about that.
So it was September 1997. Joyce and I and our 5 young children had just moved to London, England. And we had arrived, I describe it simply as broke and brokenhearted. We had tried to launch a musical, it had collapsed. We had lost a lot of money. We just found out our son was special needs with Fragile X syndrome, would require care for the rest of our life, his life. And, so we were reeling from some of that. And yet we were so thankful that we had this opportunity to come to the UK and work with songwriters and worship leaders, because that's always my heart to do. I love mentoring and encouraging other leaders. So there's all of that going on, right? And then one morning, going for a walk in the streets of London and clear in my head, just waking up and just getting ready for the day and wrestling with faith and doubt, really honestly, because I had felt like the musical was God's initiative and invitation, and I had done it and it had collapsed and it had caused us a lot of pain and suffering. And so you're wrestling with, okay, God, how does this work? And if we believe you're good, why would you invite me to do something? Or even the invitation we felt like to have children, that God was inviting us, to be parents and have children, and then our child is special needs, all of that wrestling. And in the middle of the walk, I have this encounter where all of a sudden, swirling around in and through me is this electrical current, and I'm a bit dubious about extravagant claims of spiritual experiences. I'm a Dutch-German kind of rooted guy. I like order and organization. I'm creative, but I like order and organization. And I'm having this experience, and I had it one time before in my life. Okay, so this was number 2. I'd had it when I wrote "Purify My Heart," which would have been 7-8 years before this moment. Anyway, so here I am in the streets of London, and then all of a sudden, this crackling energy coalesces into these words in this melody. Come, now is the time to worship. And then it was gone, fade away, and then it would start again. And I'm walking, and I remember just looking up to the heavens and went, now? Come now, and it was this there was an urgency to it, but there was also, it was like God was drawing and welcoming me again, just the way I was, with my mixture of faith and doubt, of deep disappointment, and yet still gratefulness for the good things God had done and who he was, all of that, what it means to be human, I think. And so I kind of raced back to the house and up the stairs to the piano and started plunking out a melody, and I jotted down these words: come, now is the time to worship. Come, now is the time to give your heart. And I remember thinking, I need words that speak of vulnerability and honesty, because versus words of praise and power. I wanted it to be more like that there is power in who God is, but it's always delivered in a gentle way of invitation, right? And then come just as you are to worship, because I was a bit of a mess. Come just as you are before your God, come. And because I felt like that was God's call to me, and I thought, well, maybe this is the type of call that goes on night and day, all over the cosmos, and all over in every nation, in every place on planet Earth. And even that sense of night and day, this call goes out, like in our night, in the darkness, there's still some light, there's still some invitation happening, even in our darkness, but night and day, even in our joy or in our sadness, and all of who we are as human beings. Come now, like, and to be honest in this moment, not pretending we're something else. So of course I had no idea what was going to come of that invitation, because it was an invitation to me,
Right.
and I was responding. So it's been miraculous, really, to watch what happened with that personal invitation with me and where it's gone. But at the same time, I still hear that invitation, and I still can go back and remember that invitation remains. That come as you are. And we're afraid of that, actually, aren't we? And I would say, as modern worship and expression and sung worship expression moves in some circles more and more towards the triumphant certainty, God is great over and over again, I think, well, maybe we need to hear in fresh way this invitation again to come as we are, not who is who we pretend to be or posture ourselves to be, that we don't need to add, we don't need to try and make ourselves be more than we are. We are who we are, daughters and sons. We are loved, and we are invited to bring our hearts, our broken hearts. Because, remember, at that point in my story, my heart was broken.
Yeah.
I was really wrestling with the reality of a broken heart. So I think about today, and I think about, okay, who in our world is brokenhearted? Who in our world is struggling? They need a fresh invitation to come as they are. And so I'm trying to do that. I continue to try and do that. I'm writing new songs that still try and express that truth.
So in that sense, even though you wrote that 20 years ago, that invitation is still there for us as worship leaders today.
Yeah.
And I think that's still a really relevant message. And it certainly moves me, because I think, what kind of a worship leader do I want to be? Firstly, do I want to respond to that invitation myself?
Right.
And secondly, how do I bring people with me on that journey? So thank you for reminding us of that. I would love you to talk a little bit more about intensity and intimacy. Unpack that for us.
Over the last years, I've observed a growing trend, let's say, of worship leaders, worship teams choosing intensity over intimacy. And I think perhaps some of it comes from a sincere desire to invite God to come. I sometimes I'll say to bring God down, almost like, if we can just get more intense, if we can sing that bridge one more time, and if we can sing it louder, maybe God will show up and do something miraculous. But we don't realize actually that growing focus on intensity is actually pushing intimacy away. Because intimacy is built on a relational foundation, and on a trust and on a faith that God is here, that God is for us, that God is with us, and that He welcomes us to come as we are and have an honest dialogue, right? Like, whether it's about our need, or even our gratitude, our sorrow, all of the depth and breadth of what it means to be a human being, in our emotions and our expressions. And I've noticed also some of the language shifting towards, when we talk about the presence of God, we talk about a shift in the atmosphere. And it puzzles me a little bit, because what we're after isn't a change in atmosphere. What we're reaching for is a person. The presence is a person. And the person of Jesus doesn't need our intensity. He needs our vulnerability and our willingness to say yes when he says, come and follow me. And the beautiful thing about the invitation of Jesus when he says, come and follow me, is when Jesus, when the stories in the Gospels, when he turned to people often who were on the margins, who were rejected, who were struggling even with a belief in themselves that they could do anything good, and he would say, come and follow me. What he was saying in that is, I actually believe in you and your calling, and I want to have a relationship with you, and you will be most satisfied with life when you say yes to me and when you follow and walk the Jesus way, so to speak. And so there's this, so then they walked together, and they did life together. And even in the Gospels, there's, you have some stories of miracles and things, but almost even all of those happened in a very relational, simple way. Oh, there was a need, and Jesus met the need. What doesn't often get told in the gospel accounts is all of the doing life, the walks, the eating together, the talking about life. And it was very dialed down, actually. It was just ordinary, right? And again, I think that's another push with this intensity over intimacy thing, is there's always this push towards, let's have something extraordinary. Let's, let's turn the amps up to 11, and let's like this. And at the very heart of the invitation of God is, no, come as you are, come and be. Breathe in the presence of God, that he's near, that he's with us, that he loves us. And breathe out, let go of your anxiety and your fear of missing out and your fear of not being enough. And when worship is infused with that kind of deep rest and trust, you don't need to generate loud and pretense and pretending you're more than who you are. Chris McQueen, a guy who does worship stuff in Canada for Vineyard, he talks about how that it's the weight of our lives and our stories that gives resonance, or to use a musical term, reverb, that we don't need to create it, right? It is who we are. But I think the intensity thing is always, you're trying to manufacture. Let's add more reverb. Let's add more volume. No, actually, we could do the opposite. Let's just take that away, and let's just be. And that's a beautiful invitation, because it's vulnerable. We can be who we are with each other and in the presence of God, because the presence of God is a person.
Following on from that, my experience as a worship leader, and then the people that I am journeying with and coaching and influencing in some way, I sense that there's a growing pressure to have somehow, whether it's manufactured or in some way authentic, that kind of intensity.
Yeah.
And so what would be your advice to us? How do we not get stuck in that trap? Because it feels like a trap, then, like a hamster wheel that you can't get off, and you have to keep producing every Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, this incredible thing.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
Right. It actually has several layers to it. One of them is actually in the song structure themselves, because the verse, chorus, bridge song structure, when you think about that song structure, the verse is like a setup. You kind of, and then you have this chorus that you can repeat, and then usually the bridge is to take it one more level up, maybe sometimes sing it an octave down and then sing it down. And it's what I call verse chorus fatigue starts to happen, because you keep going through this cycle of trying to build the intensity higher and higher. And when nothing's happening, you go, well, if I just, okay, then let's just do it again. Let's try and make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we shift that? Well, I mean, I say, you know, the cultural thing, you know, rather than protesting culture, yeah, we could do some of that, but you create culture. So I say to worship leaders, how do you shift that culture? Well, it's literally one choice, one song, one set at a time.
That's really
where
good.
you have
That's
the
really
courage to include, for example, when we're talking about, let's say, emotionally healthy worship, that includes the difficult human emotions of sadness, or giving space for people who are grieving to not get over it, right? Because that does violence to their soul. And Jesus is not a violent person. He, you know, a bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick. He came and he walked among us with this gentle awareness of people's suffering, and walking with them and walking them through it. And so I think it's one song at a time, it's one set at a time. You know, instead of picking that song that you're starting to sing on autopilot because you're wanting to generate that sense of power and greatness, choosing instead vulnerability and heart and emotional health and relate. And it's not just about emotional health. It's actually it's how you have relational health with people and with your Maker. You come as you are, you express your heart, and then you listen for the whispers of love and the whispers of invitation. It really, every song we select for our sets matters, because they go into our backup hard drive. I'm so convinced that the songs we sing carry culture almost more than anything. Which is why, it's important that we learn how to do that well. And for all worship leaders, whether they're songwriters or not, that we learn to select songs that tell God's story, that sound his invitation, and that express who we are as human beings.
This has been a really powerful conversation. Thank you for saying yes to that invitation when you were 19 or whatever age, and continuing to contend for that years later. I'm just really thankful.